Well, that was fun.
It was fun.
Thanks for joining us.
Outnumbered starts right now.
And we begin with a Fox News alert. The nation is mourning the passing of former First Lady Barbara Bush. She died yesterday at her Houston, Texas home surrounded by family. She was 92. President Trump ordered flags lowered to half-staff in her memory. Mrs. Bush, the wife of one president, the mother of another, being remembered for her unwavering devotion to her family and for elevating her favorite causes, including literacy. Her death came just days after an announcement that she would no longer seek medical care. Later this hour, we will have more on her life and legacy, plus fond memories from her eldest son, former President George W. Bush, and his wife, Laura. Stay tuned for that. And this is also developing. We are awaiting more details now from the White House as President Trump confirms his CIA director and Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo has traveled to North Korea, where he met with Kim Jong-un ahead of their potential summit. The president tweeted about it while he's hosting Japanese Prime Minister Abe at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, saying denuclearization will be a great thing for the world. There's the tweet right now. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, host of Kennedy on Fox Business Kennedy. Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich is here. And Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth. They get happier as we go along. And also with us today in the center seat, outnumbered as we say, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor as well. A smile, Richard Fowler is here. Hey, great to see you.
Hey, good to be here.
There is a lot going on.
There indeed is a lot going on.
And I follow your Twitter, so let's get to it because you've got some interesting things to say.
Oh.
There's a little teasing for you. Right incoming. Oh, boy.
Trouble.
Well, President Trump is hosting the Japanese Prime Minister at Mar-a-Lago in Florida today, and we're expecting to hear more from him about the meeting. His CIA director and Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo had a short few weeks ago, apparently, with Kim Jong-un. The president tweeted this earlier, and now we can see the tweet. Mike Pompeo met with Kim Jong-un in North Korea last week. Meeting went very smoothly, and a good relationship was formed. Details of summit are being worked out. Denuclearization will be a great thing for the world, but also for North Korea, exclamation point. Pompeo actually made the trip Easter weekend, which the CIA confirmed in a statement. The president disclosed that 5 locations are under consideration for the meeting, but none on American soil between him and the North Korean leader. The top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee not too pleased with the Pompeo revelation.
He was asked both in private meetings with me as he was pursuing his nomination and with other members, as well as in open sessions, direct questions about North Korea. And, you know, I think it would have been incredibly not only insightful, but if truth and being forthcoming as the Secretary of State nominee is one of the standards we'd like to see for the next Secretary of State, I think he failed.
Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich sounds hopeful, however.
There's a very real chance that the Trump policy of firmness is leading Kim Jong-un to decide that he actually wants a deal. I think that would be remarkably historic, and I think that having a willingness to meet with him, going through this process, really opens up possibilities that are very important, and I think, frankly, puts pressure on the Senate to confirm Pompeo as Secretary of State.
All of this is happening as Kim Jong-un is set to meet with South Korea's president next week for peace talks. So, you know, I'm curious, Richard, how is this any different than Madeleine Albright, as former Secretary of State during the Clinton years, kind of having that more clandestine meeting that she had for 6 hours on the peninsula, I might add. And we didn't get a heads up on that.
I don't think there's any difference here, and I actually don't. I disagree with Senator Menendez. I think, you know, some things have to be covert, and so I think that Pompeo meeting with Kim Jong-un is a step in the right direction. I think on this very couch, August 7th, I believe, I got in trouble from the ladies for saying I think Trump should sit down with Kim Jong-un, and now it's happening. So my predictions to the president's ears.
Well, trouble or surprise.
Hey, listen, you know, maybe like my mom would say, a broke clock is right twice a day, so maybe I'm a broke clock.
I give you much more credit than that. Because we can put batteries in that clock and then it can be right more often. But real quickly before I move on with you, so when Albright did this, I mean, it really did not turn out well for the United States. And that was a 6-hour meeting. Promises were made. None of them kept. She comes back and the conversation didn't go any farther forward. Sanctions for a quarter century now haven't worked with them. So this is trying something new. You have to lay out a plan. So now you have the potentially incoming Mike Pompeo trying to do that.
Right. I think that's what's going to be critical in the next coming weeks is what is the plan and what's hammered out before Kim Jong-un and President Trump sits down. A lot of times in these foreign agreements, most of the deal is hammered out before the two leaders even get into the room. So it's on President Trump's State Department, Kim Jong-un's foreign, whatever they call their department over there, getting to the table, figuring out what they can do, what they can do together.
I think they call it the UN department.
Yes, the UN department.
Everything else is the Kim department. That's how they differentiate.
And, figuring out with the South Koreans, with the Japanese, what we can do together with the Chinese, and then moving from there to getting everybody at the table, getting everybody in the room, and figuring out how we create peace on the peninsula and how that sort of transpires for the entire region in Asia.
So you heard Graham and now some others more widely saying, Katie, that it's strength that's leading this. So it's peace through strength, if you will. A familiar term.
Yeah, and if you go back to Pompeo's confirmation hearing, which happened after this meeting, which is very interesting to me, that he was being questioned about all of these things after going to North Korea as the CIA director and actually playing a role.
But couldn't he have even said it then?
But my point is that he was playing more of a State Department role as a Secretary of State when he went to make this diplomatic visit than he necessarily was as CIA director, although they both fit hand in hand in similar situations. What I think is most interesting about his position and the questions that he was asked during that confirmation hearing is when he said specifically, nobody knows the consequences of war more than someone who's put on the uniform and gone over and done it, which I think puts him in a unique position to do these negotiations and for him to sit down in front of Congress knowing that he had that in his back pocket shows that he has a very good poker face, first of all, but I also think that it does, as Newt Gingrich was saying, put pressure on the Senate to confirm him, especially since Democrats have already voted for him before for CIA director, and as a CIA director, he was able to pull this meeting off.
Well, and to that point, too, it was Mike Pompeo who was warning us not too long ago that North Korea was just a few months away from being able to launch a nuclear missile to the United States.
That was him.
And as CIA director, he has clear knowledge of North Korea's capabilities. So we have someone with Mike Pompeo who's very clear-eyed about North Korea, their capabilities, and what he's dealing with. So I think that's a positive there. And I also think some of the rhetoric that we're hearing from President Trump about this, maybe we'll meet, maybe we won't. It's very ambiguous. And I think that's a lot better than what we saw under President Obama, who wanted to cut a deal with Iran at all costs. And so I think it's important for President Trump to lay the groundwork. Maybe we'll negotiate something, maybe we won't. And to be a little bit more ambiguous than just wanting to cut a deal to the detriment of the United States or allies.
I want to get Kennedy in here.
No, I just think it's interesting because I know Democrats are going to attack the president no matter what he does. We have to put politics aside here and see if we really can bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. That is absolutely critical. And we have talked about the necessity of a peaceful process here, but you have to let it play out because, one of the big criticisms was the president can't go and meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. So now you have preconditions, but there are people in your party grousing about that. And, it's difficult to trust people within your own party, let alone someone else's. And, of course, I think there should be more transparency. But if you want those preconditions and if you want a level of trust, then these are the kind of meetings you have to have. And it's very interesting that Mike Pompeo is sort of in transition from CIA director to Secretary of State, which puts him, on very unique ground.
I tend to agree with that. I think the only pushback I have is that I think Mike Pompeo has a larger challenge, and that challenge is making sure, and I think Mitch McConnell has a challenge in keeping the caucus together to vote for Mike Pompeo. We already know that Rand Paul will likely vote against him, and how many other Republicans will vote against Mike Pompeo?
How many Democrats will vote for him?
That's very true. But we're the party in the opposition. I think keeping your caucus together is your first challenge, and then figuring out how many Democrats you can peel off is your second challenge. So I think the Trump White House and his political team have a big road to hoe ahead of them.
You'll have some of the red state Democrats that
absolutely, but you also have a lot of hard
Republicans at risk.
People want peace, especially the markets. Thank you very much, Richard. Now moving on. Meantime, we're getting a lot of reaction from House and Senate lawmakers who were briefed on how the Trump administration is responding to that suspected chemical attack in Syria. Lawmakers emerging from a classified briefing yesterday with some concerns. Senator Lindsey Graham saying, quote, It seems to me we are willing to give Syria to Assad, Russia, and Iran, and we're trying to find some way to leave Syria to keep ISIL destroyed. And I don't see how that works. I hope I am wrong. And now the team of inspectors heading to that site of the suspected chemical attack in Syria says it was fired upon and had to return to the base in Damascus. California Republican Ed Royce, a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, reacting to that while also sounding supportive of the administration's handling of the situation in Syria. Watch.
Now, some of that capacity, at least, the capacity we know about, has been taken out. And I think that sends a very strong message, and we expect Assad to make it difficult for us to sort of do the follow-up work on the ground in terms of the chemical weaponry. But we've seen plenty of evidence in terms of what was dropped out of those helicopters.
Meantime, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blasting President Trump for not imposing more sanctions on Russia for its support of Bashar al-Assad.
The White House shouldn't have to drag the president kicking and screaming to do the right thing when it comes to punishing Vladimir Putin and Russia. His refusals to stand up to the Kremlin is troubling and leaves many Americans wondering why. What does the president have to hide?
All right. He's damned if he does. He's damned if he doesn't. Katie, when it comes to Russia, because the president has been much more forceful, particularly in regards to Syria with Russia, and not backing down from Russia's threats to counterstrike if there, in fact, was an incursion. So should he be embracing more sanctions as well?
I would say that the president is holding off to see how Russia reacts to the current situation instead of moving forward and seeing if they're willing to come to some kind of compromise. Clearly, if it was the Russians who were firing on inspectors who were trying to get into that site, that changes the negotiation factor in the game. Again, it's a very complicated situation. The president has been very forceful when it comes to Russia in the last couple of weeks, calling Bashar al-Assad a monster. There's someone that Vladimir Putin supports. That's a big problem. But I do think the communication error this week between Nikki Haley at the UN and the White House, her going out on a Sunday show and saying we're going to implement more sanctions and then having the White House walk that back, that doesn't necessarily show strength in a force, but their actions up to that point have. And I think they're probably just looking at the situation, recalculating because it is different than it was before they sent the missiles in there, and deciding how to move forward with their new National Security Advisor, John Bolton, at the helm.
All right. So one thing that I would say about, just in terms of how long we wait, the sanctions, just to be clear, were actually passed last August, and they had nothing really to do with the chemical weapons, that the first round of sanctions. Then you had the missiles that came. And the now delay in sanctions, I don't know how much that has to do with whether or not those inspectors are fired upon. It does have to do with, what they want to look at, because the pullback happened before the weapons were fired on those inspectors. That happened on Monday. And I just bring all that up because there seems to be some sort of White House calculation, irrespective almost of what's going on the ground, which actually would be a good thing, because my question all week has been, what is our foreign policy with regard to Syria? It cannot be ad hoc and emotional. It needs to be spelled out, if not only for our own people, but for the people that we put in harm's way to fight the battle.
But it also isn't offense. It's not appropriate for the president to wage an offensive war without congressional approval, and that is a huge sticking point for many in the Republican Party, let alone wishy-washy Democrats who have become warmongers.
I think that you bring up a good point, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the AUMF, or the authorization of use of military force, which a lot of presidents have used, both President Bush, Barack Obama, and now Donald Trump. They're using a law that was passed in 2001 to strike random countries.
And 2002.
Yeah, 2002.
Yeah, there are two separate AUMFs.
Two separate AUMFs. But either way, they're 11 and 10 years old, respectively.
Yeah.
And the world looks a lot differently. And I think the voice that's missing from the Syria conversation is the American people's voice.
17 years old.
But there's also...
Yes, that's what I meant. 17 years old, excuse me. And I think that's the voice that's missing. And I think the People's Congress and the Senate, they deserve a right to vote.
This president has a history of listening to the American people.
I agree. And so that's why it's time for a new AUMF. It's time for a new AUMF.
That is irrespective of what's going on the ground with the
There's a report yesterday that Putin has told Kremlin officials to back off, and that he's looking to de-escalate relations with the United States. So perhaps that's also the reason why the Trump administration changed their tune from what Nikki Haley originally said, and then what Kudlow said thereafter.
Yeah, we don't know,
but that is what's being reported. due to the sanctions that the Trump administration has laid down on Russia, as well as these most recent missiles that Putin may be changing.
I don't trust Russia as far as we can throw them.
Tactic.
And with my sciatica, I shouldn't be throwing anyone. Tributes are pouring in as Americans remember former First Lady Barbara Bush. She passed at the age of 92. A live report from near the Bush home in Houston. Plus, breaking news as a group of House Republicans call for a criminal investigation into James Comey and others as the former FBI director continues his all-out media blitz to sell his book. Whether the DOJ will investigate and if it should, we will debate next.
He's tweeted at me probably 50 times. I've been gone for a year. I'm like a breakup he can't get over. He wakes up in the morning. I'm out there living my best life. He wakes up in the morning and tweets at me.
House Republicans now calling for a criminal investigation of fired FBI Director James Comey, Hillary Clinton, and several former and current members of the FBI and Justice Department. Those GOP congressmen are alleging potential violations of the law in the run-up to the appointment of a special counsel in the Russia investigation and the DOJ's handling of the Clinton email probe. The letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions reads in part, quote, "We are especially mindful of the dissimilar degrees of zealousness that has marked the investigations into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the campaign of Donald Trump, respectively. Because we believe that those in positions of high authority should be treated the same as every other American, we want to be sure that the potential violations of the law outlined below are vetted appropriately." Comey being asked about it just a short time ago on ABC's The View.
I haven't read it. I don't know what to make of it. It seems they've been saying that stuff since the Clinton email investigation. A whole lot of that's already being looked at by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, which is a very good thing. And I don't have any other reaction.
Okay.
The accusations are not true. I guess I should have said that first, but that's okay.
So, Kennedy, this is the former FBI Director James Comey, who also said that the Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe was an honorable, honest man. Where are we with the accountability factor here?
Well, you know, and James Comey has laid out his criteria for what is punishable if you work for the FBI. Andrew McCabe has violated that criteria. So, you know, in his estimation, Andrew McCabe should have been fired, even if he doesn't overtly say that. He knew exactly what Andrew McCabe was doing. He knew exactly what he was leaking. He probably ordered a lot of that information to be leaked. And that makes him a hypocrite. But the problem for him is he's testified.
Right.
And, you know, what has he told Congress? What statements has he made in public that contradict each other? And now you have not only Republicans who feel that his hypocrisy and his hubris and his narcissism has launched this investigation. You have a lot of Democrats who feel absolutely betrayed by this person who put themselves at the center as the moral authority of the presidential race and therefore had a great deal of influence on the outcome.
Right. I want to play this clip from former Hillary Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta, and then I want to get Richard's reaction.
I've never attacked Mr. Comey for trying to do something that was for a partisan reason. I think it was to some extent, his arrogance that led him to make a very bad error of judgment. I thought he was an idiot in the context of this election, and that it was influential in the outcome.
Are you going to read this book?
I don't think so.
You think Hillary Clinton will read this book?
I doubt it.
Should read it. She has lots of spare time in her hands. But Richard, you know, James Comey is having a hard time finding any friends on either side of the aisle. But my question for you is, are Democrats actually interested in accountability at the FBI, or are they going to continue to play this politically?
Oh, no, I think Democrats are interested in accountability, which is why we, worked with the president to approve a new FBI director. But I think there's some dramatic irony here that even though President Trump and Hillary Clinton absolutely can't stand each other, the one thing they agree on is they both hate James Comey.
And he would have been fired either way. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Administration.
He would have been fired. Exactly. He would have been the unemployment line either way. And I think if they were to sit down for a cup of coffee, the two of them would be like, well, let's talk about how much we both hate James Comey.
Is that the only thing they could get their hands on together? Lisa, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think James Comey is actually doing himself a great disservice, as well as the FBI. And I think he's really creating a liability for himself, because I think people are giving more attention to things that he previously said under sworn testimony before Congress. And Kennedy, you had briefly mentioned, the contradictions. We're seeing this play out, not only contradictions between McCabe and James Comey, according to the Inspector General report, also contradictions between what James Comey is saying, Loretta Lynch as well. And so now there's questions about who's actually telling the truth in all of this. And I think people are going to want to get to the bottom of it.
To something that Richard said just a moment ago, because I've got Lanny Davis on next hour. And, Democrats are expressing this thought that, Comey didn't tell the truth in some instances. And now they have what you're talking about, a document that they can compare to previous things he said. I would imagine that James Comey would be something that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump could agree on. And I agree with Kennedy. They both would have fired him, which is why I think it's so disingenuous for some Democrats to say that it's obstruction of justice and it's to plant those flags and those seeds against this president as political enemies, because James Comey was only his own friend. I mean, he looks in the mirror and he sees two James Comeys. And he likes both of them.
Well, and the Democrats are obviously going to play this card about obstruction of justice now because it's politically expedient. I mean, you go back to the election and you had people like Harry Reid, who was the minority leader, saying on record that James Comey violated the Hatch Act, right? So now Democrats are going to embrace this theme of being pro-Comey
and
because it's politically
let's not forget that Mark Meadows has just asked Trey Gowdy to take a much closer look at those struck page texts.
And what Trey Gowdy said,
I know we're going to discuss that later in the show.
And what Trey Gowdy said in the interview was that I think it should be handled by the IG. But I think you have to parse
here's the thing.
What James Comey's doing with what's happening in the Mueller investigation. Because what the Mueller investigation has found is you found a former national security advisor.
Irrelevant to what James
wait a minute
Comey
now. I think I think you're right. I think they're absolutely irrelevant.
Right.
And I think what the Mueller investigation has found they're completely different. And I think to put them together is a mistake.
Well, accountability is important, or it will happen again. But moving along, today the country is remembering the life of former First Lady Barbara Bush. Just ahead, a live report from near the family home in Houston, and former President George W. Bush and Laura Bush sharing their thoughts on an outpouring of support.
I and our entire family are very grateful for people's prayers and sympathies. It's the end of a beautiful life.
Plus, a push in Congress to tie the president's hands over the special counsel investigation, where that effort has hit a wall. The latest and more debate.
Remembering the life and legacy of former First Lady Barbara Bush. She's 92 as she passed away at her home last night, surrounded by family. A short time ago, the communications director for the First Lady, Melania Trump, said that Mrs. Trump will pay her respects in person to Barbara Bush and the entire family at the funeral on Saturday. Also earlier today, Mrs. Bush's eldest son, former President George W. Bush, and his wife Laura mixed tears and laughter as they shared their final moments with the former First Lady.
We had a wonderful visit. She was strong, lucid.
Funny still.
Funny. She and I were needling each other, and the doctor came in, and she turned to the doctor and said, "You want to know why George W. is the way he is?" And the doctor looked somewhat surprised. She said, "Because I drank and smoked when I was pregnant with him." I had a beautiful visit with her when it looked like, yesterday morning on the phone. And she didn't say much, but I told her I loved her.
Casey Stiegel live for us from Houston. Casey?
Still that classic sense of humor all the way up to the end. A very heavy police presence, Harris, outside of the funeral home here in West Houston, where Mrs. Bush was brought last night and where she is being prepared for public viewing on Friday. She is going to be laying in repose at the family church that they attend here in Houston, the St. Martin's Episcopal Church here in Houston. She will be noon until midnight on Friday, laying in repose so the public can come pay their respects. Then on Saturday, her private funeral will be held, invite only, and more than 1,500 dignitaries expected. From there, Mrs. Bush will be taken by motorcade up to College Station, Texas, where she will be buried at her husband's Presidential Library and Museum, the family plot there where their daughter Robin is, who died of leukemia just before her 4th birthday. And it will ultimately be George H.W. Bush's final resting place as well. Here is more of that exclusive Fox interview this morning with George W. Bush and his wife Laura, reminiscing.
Here's the thing. She had great faith. She truly believes that there's an afterlife, that she'll be wonderfully received in the arms of a loving God, and therefore did not fear death. And as a result of her soul being comforted on the deathbed, my soul is comforted.
And look at this, a live picture now from College Station. In addition to flowers and balloons, folks starting to leave books outside of the museum and library there, of course, to pay homage to the tireless work Mrs. Bush did for literacy. In fact, in lieu of flowers and cards, the family is asking for the public to donate to the Barbara Bush Foundation instead, so that the legacy can live on. And then tomorrow evening here in Houston, there will be a celebration of life ceremony at Houston City Hall. The public welcome to attend that, beginning at 6 o'clock Central Time. Lots of stuff to remember a very special woman over the coming days here in Houston and around the world, Harris.
Yeah, she spanned more than just decades of presidencies, if you will. She also was a huge part of American culture for a very long time.
She was.
An opportunity for so many people in different generations to remember the things that they loved most about the former First Lady. Casey, thank you.
Switching gears, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is rejecting calls from lawmakers to bring a bill to the floor that would limit President Trump's ability to fire special counsel Robert Mueller. Here's what he had to say yesterday about that decision.
That's not necessary. There's no indication that Mueller's going to be fired. I don't think the president's going to do that. And just as a practical matter, even if we passed it, why would he sign it?
But Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who co-sponsored a bipartisan bill to protect the special counsel, suggests the Senate Judiciary Committee plans to move forward with a vote regardless.
I don't believe Mr. Mueller's in jeopardy of being fired. I wanted to do some institutional protections for special counsels now and in the future, but I respect Mitch, and I'm going to vote in committee for the institutional protections. And again, I don't think Mueller's going to be fired, but that's my position. I'll leave it up to the Majority Leader how to run the floor.
Well, meantime, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is slamming McConnell's decision, saying it's a mistake not to pass legislation to protect the investigation. We ought to head off a constitutional crisis at the pass rather than waiting until it's too late. Richard, Mitch McConnell said there, just as a practical matter, President Trump's not going to sign this bill. So why would he bring it to the floor for a vote?
I think it's important that the Senate brings this to the floor for a vote because a couple of things. Number one, we've seen this president tweet over and over again attacking the Mueller investigation and attacking what this investigation stands for. Whether or not you agree with the investigation, I'm not a lawyer, but if I was the president's lawyer, I would say, listen, if you don't think you did anything wrong, just ignore it and continue being president of the United States. But this president over and over again continues to sort of engage with this investigation, which is causing a lot of pause for members of Congress. So I tend to agree with Lindsey Graham in this idea that let's pass it. Even if the president doesn't sign it, it's at least a speech act that says we in the United States Senate and we in the United States Congress stand behind this investigation. We stand for every special prosecutor that comes after Robert Mueller.
But Kennedy, Robert Mueller already has broad authority. Wouldn't this embolden him even more?
No, I mean, I agree that there need to be constraints put on power across the board, regardless of who's in power and regardless of, which aspect of it you are checking. And I think this is more about future special counsels. And I also think that we have to be very careful exhorting Congress and the Attorney General to appoint one every time there's some malfeasance or wrongdoing.
Yep. Well, in part because we have a situation now where there needs to be a closer look at what's going on inside some of these agencies. For instance, the Department of Justice. So we don't want to pull it so far out of the scope that we're not forcing them to somewhat do their jobs better as well and to weed out bias or anything there. But I would say this about special counsels, because we've seen one in the past that people didn't like, Ken Starr. This seems to be where they go. They do this like gymnastics move of, can I get my arms and my feet to go in 2 different countries? And they make things so broad. So I think it is a worthy discussion to have. And it just so happens that we're having it now as we're watching yet another one do all sorts of things outside boundaries that politically some won't like, politically some might.
I think that this whole thing has become a political situation on both sides of the aisle. Democrats aren't interested in preventing a constitutional crisis. They're interested in protecting their political talking point of Russia, because that's really all they have at this point. Republicans on Capitol Hill don't want the political headache of President Trump firing Robert Mueller if he were to do that. But then you have to walk the line of the people who support President Trump at the base level. His most ardent supporters want President Trump to fire Robert Mueller. So there are political minefields here, but I really doubt that Democrats are so interested in protecting from a constitutional crisis. I think that they're just interested in keeping this political talking point.
We've got to get going, but I have a feeling we're going to revisit this at some point again. I think that's safe to say. All right, well, there are new concerns over whether former FBI Director James Comey gave false testimony to Congress about his decision to exonerate Hillary Clinton from criminal charges in the email investigation. What top lawmakers are trying to do to get answers.
Well, as we reported earlier, 11 GOP lawmakers are demanding Attorney General Jeff Sessions launch a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton, former FBI Director James Comey, and other former and current DOJ officials over their actions leading up to the appointment of a special counsel in the Russia investigation and the handling of the Clinton email probe. This comes amid growing concerns over Comey's testimony on that email investigation. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows sending a letter to House Oversight Committee Chair Trey Gowdy, requesting he do a further review of emails and texts between FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page that have recently been sent to Congress. Meadows writing, quote, documents produced to the committee suggest a concerning level of coordination between the Department of Justice and the FBI throughout crucial moments of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Now, if true, that would contradict Comey's previous testimony and public statements about his decision to exonerate Hillary Clinton in the email case. Watch this.
Look me in the eye and listen to what I'm about to say. I did not coordinate that with anyone. The White House, the Department of Justice, nobody outside the FBI family had any idea what I was about to say. I say that under oath. I stand by that. There was no coordination.
All right, Gowdy responding to Meadows' request last night on the story.
I'm going to send it to the Inspector General. I'm going to send it to the Department and the FBI. To the extent that there's an allegation that false testimony was given, Congress is not the entity to investigate that. I think it fits most neatly within what Horowitz is doing now, which is looking at how unprecedented this investigation was in 2016.
All right, so how problematic are some of these statements for James Comey when there are texts and even his own admission in his book that he's hawking that contradict those statements?
Well, I mean, I think the question becomes is what's in this book, right? I think everybody's waiting to read what's in this book to know to figure out how deep this is and how much of this book is fact and how much of this book is fiction. But beyond that, I think if you listen to Congressman Gowdy there very carefully, his statement sort of sealed it for me. I don't agree with him on much, but on this particular one, he says this investigation falls squarely in the realm or in the court of the Inspector General at the Department of Justice, not here in the United States Congress. And I think what we know from what we've seen over the past year is that the United States Congress, they're not the best at doing investigations because you have, as he said, Trey Gowdy said a couple months ago, they're literally like an episode of Mean Girls because it's you leak, I leak, we leak, we all leak together. And that's problematic when you're dealing with confidential, classified information. So I think it's better to stay at the IG, let the IG come up with a report, and then let's digest it from there. But the ideal to put it back into the throes of Congress and to the jaws of Congress for it to be all leaked out to the American people, that doesn't seem to me to be the answer.
So Katie, should James Comey's book tour include a stop with the Inspector General so he can set the record straight? Because, you know, as he said, he assumed Hillary Clinton was going to win, and therefore he didn't want her to have an illegitimate presidency if there were 600,000 emails, potentially some of them classified, on Anthony Weiner's laptop.
Well, some people have said the reason why the Inspector General report on how the FBI handled the 2016 investigation into Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information over and over again is taking so long is because things keep getting added. James Comey's book just came out. You can bet the Inspector General is taking a look at every single statement inside that book.
And getting pressure from Republicans and Democrats
but
about some of those statements.
The reason why, and Trey Gowdy is absolutely right, the reason why the Department of Justice and the Inspector General handle these cases, because the Inspector General, as they did in the McCabe report that came out last week, has the ability to recommend disciplinary action, which means potential prosecution for those who lie under oath. McCabe lied under oath 3 times. He lied to James Comey, FBI investigators, and IG investigators. James Comey leaked information to a friend and to the media, which Democratic attorneys have said might be getting
lied to Chuck Grassley about it.
Hold on, breaking news in because this is happening right now. So after Congressman Meadows alleged that new texts and emails indicate coordination between the FBI and DOJ over July 2016 Comey statement and broader coordination over email investigation, Chairman Gowdy has now, just moments ago, formally asked the FBI, DOJ, and the Inspector General to look into the allegations, which was exactly what you were saying, Richard, that it might get to that level. So I've actually got all the letters and everything else, which is why I have my...
I actually spoke to him earlier today, Congressman Meadows, who, full disclosure, I used to work with. And it is belief that James Comey, in sworn testimony before Congress, that he lied to Congress back in 2016. Because what James Comey told Congress is that there was not coordination between the FBI and the DOJ in writing the exoneration letter.
Right.
But that's absolutely not true. I mean, there's literally documents that indicate the fact that they were coordinating over the exoneration level. So the DOJ is saying that there wasn't coordination, but there's documents.
And the investigation,
I think that they also will look at, I mean, outside of the coordination is, you know, because Comey's pushback on that also has been, well, it's routine for me to do that. Well, it's routine for me to write a letter like that and to have something like that. You remember, he said that previously. So I don't know that the two can actually exist together.
They can't.
I don't know that they can. So, but to just make the point clear that just moments ago, Trey Gowdy now is now formally the congressman asking for them to look into this whole thing. And you mentioned the Inspector General. Remember where the IG has been in all of this? Couldn't find those Strzok page texts at the FBI. Whoopsie, IG has them.
Well, I wonder why they didn't want them out.
Listen,
We're
now
not
the
sure
IG has
why
them.
McCabe was fired. Oh, the IG can tell us exactly what was going on.
All right, so we have to move on. Let's not lose faith in the IG just yet. And you know, also remember we've got a U.S. attorney, John Huber, who has also launched part of an investigation. President Trump's he continues his battle with the so-called fake news media. He's going to be skipping the White House Correspondents' Dinner for the 2nd year, but he's making other big plans that night that will likely raise eyebrows in the press. Details straight ahead.
President Trump is again planning to skip the White House Correspondents' Dinner for the 2nd straight year. Instead, he will hold a campaign-style rally that night in Washington, Michigan. A Trump campaign official saying, while the fake news media will be celebrating themselves with denizens of Washington society in the swamp that evening, President Trump will be in a completely different Washington, celebrating our national economic revival with patriotic Americans. Last year, during the White House Press Center, the president held a rally in Pennsylvania and spent much of the night bashing the press. So, Kennedy, is he the ultimate troller?
He's totally
Washington, Michigan to hold this rally?
Yes, absolutely. And he's going to make it bigger than last year's rally. I do wish that he would go. I think this is such an incredible opportunity for him to jab and counterpunch with the press. I think everyone would really love it, and I think the country would get a lot out of it. And I will say there are plenty of members of the press, and there will be plenty of people in the room who are truly patriotic Americans.
I wholeheartedly disagree, because I love the juxtaposition of him being in Washington, Michigan, when all these media types that he hates, that he's been railing against, who have written a lot of false stories about him, are in Washington, D.C. So I love the juxtaposition. I actually, on the show a couple of weeks ago, said that President Trump should do this just like he did last year. So I'm glad to see that he's listening. I'm just kidding. But I think this is smart. And I think it's so much stronger for him to be in front of his supporters and saying, I stand with you, I don't stand with them.
Yeah, I think he can take it.
I agree with Kennedy. I think he should take it, number one. Number two, I think this night is about giving scholarships out to deserving children so they can become journalists. And I think we all know the truth that it's not everybody that works in news is fake news. I think the president sort of tried to paint this big brush that everything is the fake news media, and that's just not true.
Well, full disclosure, some of us will be going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think
we will be
everybody
supporting
here will be, right? However,
good, smart kids getting
I
scholarships.
do think that there is something to be said about the mixing of government officials and the press. When the press is supposed to be, holding the government accountable. So I understand the president not wanting to be there, but I also agree that it would be nice for him to go to at least one of them during his first term.
No, Ben, I think people want to laugh. People want to see the president in different contexts. And when he is self-deprecating, when he pokes fun at himself, it is so effective.
I think his supporters are going to want him to be out in a rally in front of the voters who supported him. I guarantee you, everyone that supported President Trump would much rather
he can have rallies every other night of the year. This is the one night of the year where
it's the juxtaposition. It's the side by side.
Juxtapose all the time. This is so effective for presidents when they do it well.
You could be so effective at using your White House correspondent speech to dispel major news stories. Take a page out of Barack Obama's book.
Of the press.
Barack Obama destroyed the birther movement in his White House correspondence speech by saying, here's my birth certificate. He did the whole Lion King bit. It was funny. He destroyed the news story. If he really wants to destroy Comey, if he really wants to destroy this Russia collusion, go to the White House correspondence dinner, give a good joke about it, and then move on.
No, because the takeaways, even from his speech, aren't going to be fair. President Trump knows this. So instead, he's going out creating his own narrative by standing
by
in front
attacking
of the
the
people
press,
who
all you
supported
do
him.
is continue creating this animosity that already exists.
I do think it's smart, but I also think it would be great for him to go and make fun of them to their face. So anyway, we're outnumbered in just a moment.